Gaitho, what is your comment on all these issues of politicians stealing money, stealing loans, looting money all over? What do you think is the way forward here? What are we going to do as citizens? Because we cannot keep on talking, tweeting, writing, posting. We need action. We need to take action.
We need to take action, Americs. We are tired of this bullshit. We are tired of the garbage we are seeing everywhere. So let me tell you something weird I observed today. So after the Trump assassination attempt, then immediately I saw Elon Musk. Elon Musk said that he has endorsed Donald Trump for the presidency in light of the happenings of today. Now, I was like, can you imagine if a businessman in Kenya tried endorsing a candidate for president, what would happen? We have seen the repercussions. We have seen everything that happens in Kenya when you align with one individual or presidential candidate. It's become so bad that if you are involved in politics, you are socially and economically isolated. We saw during especially Uhuru's presidency, which was very vindictive, very toxic, Uhuru ensured that everyone was below him because he wanted to remain as the alpha and omega. And so we have to anchor our economic policies to transcend individual or personal party loyalties and whatever, so that we don't have a situation where we have one singular individual whose only ambition in life is to ensuring everyone else falls so that he can remain on top. That was one thing I noticed. I was just trying to juxtapose what was happening there to here. But then we come to why we are in the situation we are in, who is influencing our policies, who is deliberately crafting our downfall, who is making sure that we remain poor, we remain an oppressed people. Number one, I can always say it's the opportunists, the people who have profited from our misery, our collective misery. Is number one is the foreigners. Personally, I like calling them, please pardon me for my French, I like calling them Muzungu pieces of shit, not the entire race, but the ones who are narcissistic enough to be able or to craft the ideology that only them should prosper and the rest should be below them. So we've been talking about capital flight, and one of our biggest problem in Kenya is that, and they have hoodwinked us. For instance, I started hearing of something called the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, since the 80s and then or the 90s and the 2000s, and they made it look like access for our products to the American market is a privilege. Yet we are good designers, yet we have the raw material, yet we have the expertise to, for instance, when you go to America, you go to one of the Woolworths or whatever stores, you go Walmart, I don't think they have Woolworths, but you go to Walmart and whatnot, you're going to see jeans, you're going to see clothes which are written made in Kenya. So they've been made in our EPZ factories here in Athi River and whatnot. And they go there just to be labeled, just to be put a brand, if it's Levi Strauss and whatnot, and yet the same can get into the local market. But then they erect entry barriers. They erect entry barriers for even local entrepreneurs, so that our products, which are made with our cotton and with our labor and with our resources, can access a foreign market. And we cannot get the same quality here. So it's almost like we are beneath them. It's almost like it's been institutionalized. It's almost like the bureaucratic pieces of shit who work in KRA, who work in Treasury, are conspiring with these foreigners to ensure that we remain as oppressed people. You look at our coffee. Our coffee is diminishing in our production, but the best of our coffee is taken outside the country. And then they go and take just a fraction of it, 10%, and then they mix it with 90% of Brazilian coffee, and then it is imported here as Nescafe, and you idiots are here, you are celebrating that you are drinking coffee, yet it is 10% of the same coffee that your parents and grandparents are growing in their farms. You understand? So we've been deliberately put in this state, and then they they come and scaremonger you and tell you, build and fashion all these narratives about stability and economic prosperity, but it is them who are prosperous. Us, we are remaining here consuming third-rate products while we have the capacity to build. And one thing we should be focusing on is domestic consumption, value addition, so that when we are exporting something, we are not exporting to a go down in Dubai so that it can be value added and packed and branded. We can do all of that here and create those jobs so that we sell to these Muzungu pieces of shit at the same value, at the same marked up value that they would buy from somebody else. And that is what farmers in Latin America are doing. So it is, and that contempt continues spreading to how we approach our immigration. For instance, in Kenya, any foreigner can land in JKIA and get a visa on arrival. But us, we go to the US Embassy, you are queued there. They make us go through hoops. They take our application fees. They don't even refund. Which is why I was saying the other place we should be occupying is occupying US Embassy. Because how do they charge $200 for an application where they already have a quota where they know we are going to allow these ones? They already have a quota. So today they say we are only allowing 20 or 30. So everyone there, you're just going as a formality because they have pre-decided and predetermined who is going to get a visa and who is not going to. And then we have seen this Meg Whitman. She has insinuated herself so much in our policy making. She's taking selfies. She's doing a lot of PDA with Ruto. And I'm saying, who the fuck does she think she is? She's just a mere diplomat brought here to serve a purpose. She's supposed to be neutral. She is not even hiding that she's pro this faction of the political divide. She doesn't care about Kenyans. She's here serving commercial interests. And we as Kenyans are supposed to clap for her because Ruto held an umbrella for her. That is the highest form of contempt. We are here because of colonialism. These are the offshoots of colonialism in the 60s and the 70s, and we still find ourselves in the age of the Aquarius. We are still complying with such nonsensical PR stunts. So if we are saying occupy everywhere, we also include occupy US Embassy, because number one, they have enabled this rogue regime. They have facilitated all these things you're seeing, the murders and the genocide and the massacres in Githurai and Rongai. But over and above that, they have implemented, because we have a weak Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they have implemented some immigration policy where Kenyans are made to feel as if we are going to beg for visas. You should make those decisions earlier, so that if you're not going to give somebody a visa, you're going to refund 75% of the educational or of the applicational fees. And I think everyone, we are on board with that. I'm going to touch on something about education. We are where we are because, number one, of our media is very toxic. You have seen how they tried to suppress the numbers of the people in Kware, in Mukuru kwa Jenga. They were lying blatantly. Linus Kaikai, shame on you if you're listening. You're full of shit, you journalists. Journalists should not be allowed anywhere where we are doing our protests or doing our activities. Because if you're going to get the real information from the people and then you go and alter it because you've been paid by State House, then we should not allow you to be there. So journalists are one part of the problem. Number two, we have religion. And number three, we have the educational curriculum. We've been talking about something called the quota system. I've been speaking about it severally. So during the Moi era, they came up, and during 844, they came up with something called the quota system, where now they select. It's almost like they sieve. It's almost like they cherry pick the best brains, which will go to some certain schools which have better facilities than the others. But if you look, and Jimmy was talking about the amount of money that has, we've been expending in the name of debt. We've been collecting. Now this year they've collected 2 trillion in taxes. They are going to borrow another probably 2 to 3 trillion in in loans. But we are not seeing anything on the ground. The counties are not building anything. So the quota system, and there's this misconception that the government built Alliance School, or the government built Mangu High School. No, the schools were started and they were donated by colonialists. They were donated by the colonialists because they had grabbed our land. Now they wanted to make some concessions to hoodwink the people who are stupid by then, to be hoodwinked with a church. It was always the Holy Trinity. So there was always a church, a school, and a hospital. So they hoodwink you with that. They give you that trilogy. And so the land was what was donated, and then they mostly donated it to the church. But the parents who took their children there were always charged a development fee, and that development fee was in every fee structure. And that is what was used to build the schools. Over and above that, there used to be harambes. So there is nobody who can claim that the government has ever built any school. But why do we find ourselves with this so-called capitation? And again, I repeat that you idiots who are saying that Matiang'i should be president, you need to understand that they allocated hundreds of billions of shillings over 10 years to go to capitation, money that should have gone to build schools instead, so that instead of converting social amenities like halls into, or dining rooms or whatever, instead of converting them into boarding facilities, then we would have expanded the educational facilities and educational access. I give you another example. There's this saying that the closest school is the best school. So instead of having a boarding school where somebody, I saw there's a lady called Karibi who sings, and her son got an accident when he was leaving Chavakali coming back to Nairobi. Why are we subjecting students to these long journeys to go to school? What we should be doing, the closest school is the best school. Like now Nairobi, all the schools were amazing if you look at Upper Hill and whatever, but because subsequent boards, subsequent management, subsequent counties neglected them, so the schools have reduced and fallen in stature and in their quality of education they provide. But they were high-end schools if you look at them today. But even Kibera Olympic, it used to lead in the KCPE results. So what we need is not now to come up with more entry barriers under the guise of quota system and whatnot. Every county, every CDF, every constituency receives no less than 110 million per year. The cost of building a school is 10 million. Why are we all cramming? We are chasing all of us to go to Mangu, to go to Alliance, to go to where, while we should be concentrating on the amount of money that is stolen in the grassroots. You understand? It's the same thing with hospitals. The cost of building a referral hospital, KU, which was the last one, was 10 billion Kenya shillings. Why is everyone rushing to Nairobi to KNH while these governors are just blowing a lot of money? We already have the numbers. Thankfully, because of the likes of Jimmy Wanjigi, we've been able, I knew there was corruption. Trust me, 2 years ago, I knew there was corruption. I knew they used to steal money. I just never put it into context, the level at which the theft is perpetrated by the political class, until I saw the actual numbers. So this is real. We are speaking about people who are repatriating our money, stashing it into foreign accounts. I was contacted by a group who said that they are the people who are behind Ruto not addressing the Congress, and they said now they are mapping all the bank accounts, foreign bank accounts that are stashing Kenyan proceeds of crime. Those are the same people you celebrate in the country. Those are the same people who you love and adore and whatever. So back to the illusion of national schools is that we now need to have national schools in every county. We've already identified that it costs 10 to 20 million to build a functional school with every facility. Then we abolish boarding school. Boarding school absorbs a lot of resources from parents because they have to invest in bed, they have to invest in uniforms, they have to invest in what? And sleep is not a productive activity. So that we lay more emphasis. First of all, we expunge religion from the curriculum. We remove the churches from managing schools so that they are run by professional boards. We lay more emphasis on sciences, on science, on technology, on agriculture, on sports and arts, so that we can create now a new, so that we cannot have like 100% of our graduates, all of them aspiring to do business administration or to do what? No, we have artists, we have musicians, we have agronomists, we have everything. We have even vocational training. Now there is a shortage of, you get somebody to be an electrician for you. They are meeting you with a lot of shoddy work because they haven't perfected the art, and it has to start not just in high school but in primary school. But we've been bogging kids to do a lot of homework, carry big bags, waking them up, I don't know, at 5 a.m. to go to school. That is to learn important subjects which will not even be relevant in their careers in the future, while they should start. If somebody is good in sports, if somebody is good in music, if somebody is good in being an electrician or whatnot, they should start in primary school so that they start perfecting the craft earlier in life. So that is one of the. And then the church has captured, especially our politicians, because our politicians now love masses when they go and address masses, and then it comes on TV, and then they feel they stroke their bloated egos after saying absolutely nothing. So the church can be there, as an oversight. And then religion should be a mandatory undertaking in every school. If a kid feels they are Christian, nobody should block them. If there's a Muslim, there should be all those facilities in every school. But they should not be driving policy. They should not be adding students to their mental impotence. We have seen the position they have taken in our political dynamics today. We don't trust them. We no longer listen to them because they have shown us that given an opportunity, they will be always inclined to identifying and gravitating towards thugs and thieves like William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua and whatnot. So we remove them from the educational establishment, and let's start investing in our youth so that. Okay. Sorry, Amerix, how much longer? How much longer?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. So we expunged religion from the curriculum because this CBC was an imposition of Fred Matiang'i and Uhuru and God knows who else. We don't know whether there was public participation, but even if there was, we have come to understand that public participation in Kenya is a formality, is just done, for the cameras. But now let's be intentional. And even as we are talking about overhauling the political and economic structure, let every sector contribute in a way. You already know the challenges that affect you in your, whether it's in industry, whether it's in agriculture, so that we have one harmonized document to overhaul our economic blueprint, so that we build a new one, we anchor it to the constitution, so that in future, one president cannot wake up and say, oh, because I hate Jimmy Wanjigi, I used to love him, he's my friend, let me go rock up to his house and raid him when his family is there. We don't want to see such scenes again, and they will only be a figment of our imagination. They will only be a distant past if our reforms are intentional, if they are deliberate, and if they are forthright, and if we are all committed to the same particular process. Thank you very much, Amerix, for having me.
Thank you very much, Francis. Let me go back to Jimmy. Jimmy, can we continue with the discussion again about
yes,
the debt? You were talking about the four levels of debt in this country.
Yes, Amerix, I'm glad to be back. I was saying that we have what you call 4 pockets of debt. And the 4 pockets are described this way. The Paris Club pocket. This Paris Club pocket is the pocket that has the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, and a lot of the Western bilateral agreements. We have another, which is called the London Club debt. The London Club debt is where you have Eurobond, and you have syndicated loans. Very expensive debt. Then you have the Chinese debt. Some of it, most of it, very kosher, but there's been some malfeasance, which I'll explain shortly. It's very soft, but I'll tell you of something that was glaringly a big fraud on Kenyans. And the last pocket is what you call domestic debt. Now, remember what I said earlier, that in what is called the medium to long term, our law is very clear. You can only borrow for development. Only borrow for development. So you'll find in the bilateral, what you call the Paris Club debt, the bilateral ones, you'll find them on the budget. You'll find line items. For example, USAID is funding a bridge in Lamu, for example, or British aid is funding something in education, or there is a road being built by the Italians and it's on the budget. It is always in what you call the appropriations bill. The appropriations bill is basically the budget according to our laws. Now, you'll find that. You'll find there is support for IMF and World Bank in the budget. It is there. Some budget is about going to line items, what are called vote items in the budget. Some of this IMF money I'll come to later, we are questioning what it's about because it is not in the budget. Now, you come to what you call this new pocket that was introduced over the last 10 years or so, called the London Club pocket. Kibaki took a small portion of it as he was exiting, but it was really perpetuated under this regime of Uhuru. That pocket of London Club is very expensive commercial money, more or less commercial money. It comes from private investors. Eurobond comes from private investors looking for where they can put their money, right, and earn a good interest rate. So the interest rate was taken for our first Eurobond of Trubeni was about 6 or 7%, but it has gone up. Now, Eurobonds that the Uhuru Ruto government took was 7 billion. They've also taken a similar amount under syndicated loans, 7 billion. And I can tell you today that none of that money, because it is long term, it is beyond 1 year, none of that money, you're talking about $15 billion, appears anywhere in our budget. It funds not one project. It does not even, we don't even have it as appearing in the consolidated fund. It does not fund one item on the budget. That is your London Club pocket, and it is very expensive. Then you have the Chinese debt. The Chinese debt, most of it is anchored in our budget. It is very clearly stipulated what projects they're supporting. Right? If we are doing a road, if we are doing SGR, it has been there. But SGR has been a fraud of monumental proportions. And I'll simply put it this way, just to give you an example. Just to give you an example. I'm very familiar with this project called SGR. Very familiar. I initiated that project under the Kibaki regime. In fact, it was under the coalition agreement of Kibaki and Raila. We started that project in 2008, and that project was simply a private project. It had no government money. We wanted to do a private feasibility study because a company called RVR had failed. And we wanted to do private investment of a line from Mombasa all the way to Malaba. Right? Simply a private investment, no taxpayers' money. Our costing out of our feasibility study and our technical study came to 55 billion shillings, all the way from Mombasa to Malaba. I suddenly saw an amount of just Mombasa to Nairobi, somebody parachuting a project that had become government under the Uhuru government of 380 billion, just Mombasa to Nairobi. That project from Mombasa to Naivasha costed for what were called the original construction plus rolling stock amounted to 500 billion shillings. So just to give you a summary. So the cost of the project is 500 billion. Chinese Exim Bank, that's the Chinese debt, say we are going to loan the Kenya government a total of 90% of that money. So Kenyans, you must raise 10%. 10% of 500 is 50 billion shillings. So us from our hard-earned taxes must pay 10% before they pay the 90%. So we did an audit of these amounts. It's part of our debt audit. We did an audit. What happened? Did the Chinese give us all the money that they said? Yes, they did. They gave all the money. It was paid directly to China Road and Bridge Company, the 90%. So did Kenyans raise the 50 billion, which was 10% of 500, right? And did they contribute their share of 10%. We did the sums. Now, on the loan part, I want you to remember we are servicing that loan at very expensive rates. In fact, this coming month, there's a big bill coming up. Now, did we raise the 50 billion to as our contribution of 10%? So we did the numbers, right? And it's called Self-Raising Finance, SGR grant from the Treasury. So 50 billion was supposed to move from Treasury to Kenya Railways and then to the contractor called China Road and Bridge. So we just did the math. Eric, it was not 50 billion that was paid. It was 644 billion shillings that came out of the Treasury to go to Kenya Railways, to then go to China Road and Bridge as self-raising finance for a project worth 500 billion. So we paid for it with our own money and even more. And yet we took a loan and we are paying back that loan. China Road and Bridge for the building of SGR from Mombasa to Naivasha was paid a total of almost 1.2 trillion for a project of 500 billion, according to the contract documents. So 700 billion above what was required. That is a frightening fact. Then you come to something called domestic debt. What you hear, bonds and bills taken from our local banks, insurance companies, pension funds. This amount of the total debt we're talking about, almost 11 trillion, today stands at 5.1 trillion. 800 from our pension funds, 700 from insurance companies, the rest from banks. In other words, it's our deposits, the Kenyans' deposits in our banks, that the banks have decided to take to the treasury, loan to the treasury, and then our taxes pay them their huge interest rates. So you can see where you see some bank CEOs earning humongous amounts of bonuses and all sorts of amounts like 400 million shillings a year. This is why our money going to our government and our taxes paying for all these banks to make humongous profits at our expense. You and I try and borrow, we are told to borrow at 25%. They are loaning to the government at 16%. It is a monumental fraud because, again, there is nowhere in our appropriations bills revenue that you can say this money. Look at bonds. The other day they took an infrastructure bond of 200 and something billion shillings. I think it was February. What infrastructure on the budget was being funded? Nothing. Nothing. These bonds and bills have funded nothing in our budget. And yet, do you know how much interest we have paid for 5.1 trillion over 10 years? We have paid them a total of 2.7 trillion in interest payments. This is criminality beyond your imagination. And there are some key banks here that have perpetuated this fraud. KCB, Cooperative Bank, Equity Bank. Those are three banks that have perpetuated a very clear fraud on the Kenyan public, us as depositors, and us as taxpayers, and made humongous profits, become oligarchs against the sovereign, against us. And we must start saying we are not going to take this rubbish anymore. And this rubbish goes this way. If you have deposits in those banks, if your parents have deposits in those banks, we should pull them out tomorrow, not today, not yesterday, not the day after, tomorrow, if not today. Remove that money. Take it to banks that are not defrauding us, because what is happening there is a fraud of the highest proportions. I want to go back to the London Club debts. These bonds, Euro bonds, these syndicated bonds, these syndicated loans, none of those appear on the budget. But one underlying fact you will find is that somewhere along the way, like you saw recently with the latest payments of Eurobond, The last payment of Eurobond was paid 500 so-called billion balance, right, of the 2 billion we had borrowed. That was paid by World Bank, IMF. Why are they underwriting money that never came to us? Who is this that they are backing? So here they are. They encourage us to take those very expensive loans, knowing full well they are not on a budget. And then when we can't pay, IMF comes up and it starts rattling. Oh, we can save you, but these are the conditions. And the conditions become a matter of they become a matter of our slavery. Now, all this information I'm giving is in the public domain. Our forensic audit is in the public domain. We got it from public documents. We are not trying to create new documentation. And we've been speaking this for the last 2 years. Kenyans need to understand categorically that we are in a mode of slavery. And I'll perpetuate this slavery by going back to the point where we were saying today 80% of our tax revenue is going to one item called debt. These debts I'm talking about, and which we have already paid for, don't owe, but we are going to keep being made to pay unless we cut off this chain because it is illegal. We do not owe it.